stop everything. A new Gallup number dropped, and a CNN host went into meltdown. When Republicans gain House seats, Democrats lead by 1. When Democrats gain, Democrats lead by 8. Tonight, Democrats are up 7. And if that holds, history says the GOP falls, not rises. There is no precedent for Republicans gaining seats under this map. None. The power narrative corporate media sold you was a cover-up exposed. If this trend locks in through 2026, we're not talking chaos for Democrats. We're talking a Republican collapse, a walkout from the old storyline, and a truth bomb about democracy. But here's the catch. One number could flip everything.
When the GOP gains House seats, look at this. Democrats are ahead by only a point. When the Dems gain House seats, look at this. Democrats are ahead by 8 points. Democrats are up by 7 right now. If this 7-point lead holds in the next year and it averages out next year in 2026, Democrats plus 7, there is no historical precedent for Republicans actually gaining House seats. The Democrats gain in every year. That looks like what Gallup shows right now.
Yeah, again, and this number right here for Democrats may be one of the better numbers they've seen in some time.
You got it exactly right, Joe.
All right.
We've got a rare moment where the data cuts through the noise. Tonight, a brand new party identification shift just turned the map upside down, and a CNN analyst spelled it out with receipts. If you care about the House, the Senate, and the survival of democratic norms, this matters a lot. Here's the headline number, and it's not spin. Gallup's latest shows Democrats leading party identification by 7 points nationally. A 7-point swing from a tie earlier this year.
Just out was really eye-popping to me.
It was shocking to me, John, and it comes down to party identification. Do you identify as a Democrat or as a Republican? And traditionally speaking, this is a metric that has been quite telling of elections, and we'll get into that a little bit. Party ID margin, Dem versus Republicans.
This isn't a vibe story. It's a data story. When pollsters simply ask, what party do you identify with? Americans are telling them they're moving left of where they were even a few months ago. That's not a campaign ad. That's the country talking. This isn't a vibe story. It's a data story.
Specifically, I'm talking about Gallup. Back in Q1 of 2025, it was a tie. Look at how much Democrats have gained on this metric, according to Gallup. Their latest metric, Democrats are ahead by 7 points. That is a 7-point movement to the left. I looked at some other pollsters as well to see if there was similar movement. Among Quinnipiac, it was +1 Republican.
Here's why this is a big deal for ordinary people who don't memorize polls. Party ID is the tide. It sheds who shows up, what's funded, which arguments land, and how swing districts decide close races. When the tide moves, everything afloat moves with it. School boards, judgeships, state houses, House seats. If you felt like MAGA energy was supposed to be inevitable, the tide just turned against that storyline. And context matters. 4 years ago, at this same point in the midterm cycle, Democrats were only up by 1 in Gallup's measure heading into 2022. That was a defensive year. But in 2018, remember those midterms? Democrats were up by roughly 4 around this point, and they delivered major House gains. Look at the comparison, 2018 versus 2022.
And you can see, again, movement to the left, Democrats +3. You know, last year, going into the 2024 presidential election, that was the rare time in which Republicans actually held a lead in Gallup's party ID measure. That Republican lead is no more. Adios, amigos, eliminated. Now Democrats ahead.
Now we're staring at +7, not +1, not +4, 7. And the analyst didn't sugarcoat it. He literally says, adios, amigos, eliminated. That brief Republican edge you saw on party ID last cycle, gone. He literally says, adios, amigos, eliminated.
By 7 points, at least according to Gallup.
And this is when pollsters call and ask you for your party. Basically, this is self-reporting of what party you're in, and now you're seeing this 7-point swing in what people are saying in this. And historically, what does that mean?
Yeah, okay. What does it matter when Democrats have a lead on party ID at this particular point in midterm cycles? Well, I want you to take a look back at some past midterm cycles. Okay, right now we got the Democrats ahead by 7. You go back 4 years ago.
So let's translate numbers into power. Here's what that means when you look at history. When Republicans have gained House seats, the party ID gap has typically been near even. Democrats ahead by about 1. When Democrats have gained House seats, the party ID gap has averaged closer to 8. Here's what that means when the GOP gains seats.
The Democrats were only ahead by 1 point. This doesn't look anything like what we had at this point going into the 2022 midterm cycle. It looks much more like what we had going into the 2018 midterm cycle, in which Democrats were ahead by 4 points. They're actually doing better at this point than they were doing.
And then came the line that should make every campaign manager sit up straight. There's no historical precedent for Republicans gaining House seats if Democrats average a 7-point party ID lead across the year. That's not a prediction, it's a warning label based on the entire modern record. There's no historical precedent for Republicans gaining House seats.
During the 2018 cycle, if you average in the Quinnipiac, it's about the same. But at this particular point, what you're seeing is Democrats doing considerably better than they did back in the 2022 midterm cycle. And more than that, Democrats have been gaining throughout this year compared to what we saw back in the 2021 year, in which we saw Republicans gaining during the year. And what we've ended up with in quarter 3 is Democrats ahead by 7, much better than the position that they had going into 2022.
Let's pause on the through line here. Legitimacy. For years, the MAGA movement tried to sell the idea that the people were permanently on their side and any loss was a conspiracy. But when more Americans tell pollsters they identify as Democrats, that undercuts the authoritarian narrative that only one faction is the real America. The real America is complicated, and today it's shifting away from the chaos politics that tried to drown out facts with rage. Now, I can already hear the counter arguments. But polls were wrong in 2016. True, some were. But this isn't a horse race ballot test. This is self-identification, a broader measure of how people see themselves culturally and politically. Self-identification moved, and that matters.
When they were only ahead by 1 point in quarter 3 of 2021.
So 4 points was a good year for Democrats in 2018. 1 point was a bad year for Democrats in 2022. The number 7, where does that rank? What does that tell us about how
what
they
is that? Exactly right. All right, so we have 2022 midterm, we have 2018 midterm.
Also important, look at the slope, not just the snapshot. Quarter by quarter, 2025 has been a steady grind leftward from a tie in Q1 to +7 in Q3. That's momentum. It says persuasion is happening somewhere. Suburbs, younger voters re-engaging, independents rising to chaos, maybe backlash to book bans, abortion bans, or election denialism. Quarter by quarter, Democrats gained through 2025.
Now let's go all the way back. We'll jump in the DeLorean and essentially look at party ID advantages in midterms. When the GOP gains House seats, look at this. Democrats were ahead by only a point. When the Dems gain House seats, look at this. Democrats were ahead by 8 points. Democrats are up by 7 right now.
But here's the caution. Tides can recede. A lead in party ID is a head start, not a finish line. It becomes real only when it translates into registration, turnout, and the courage to say no to disinformation. The MAGA machine will answer this with the usual playbook, flooding the zone with conspiracies, amplifying crime panic without context, manufacturing outrage at schools, and undermining legitimate vote counting before the votes are even cast. Their strategy depends on making politics exhausting so fewer people participate. That's where pro-democracy voters come in. The reason the 2018 cycle looked the way it did wasn't just numbers. It was a response to attempts to turn government into a weapon for one man. Voters pushed back on corruption and chaos. In 2022, Democrats were only up by about 1 at this point, and yet a coalition still held the line against the predicted red wave that didn't show. Now with +7, the stakes are even clearer. It's about whether truth can beat cynicism when people have the wind at their back. Let's make it concrete. A +7 party ID doesn't win a single seat by itself, but it changes the battlefield. It means swing districts in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona, and the Upper South become more competitive. It forces Republicans to spend money on defense instead of offense. It opens space for candidates who talk like normal people about jobs, healthcare, reproductive freedom, and rule of law, to connect without being drowned out by performative culture wars. And it exposes a contradiction inside the MAGA project. If the public is shifting away from them, they have 2 options: broaden their appeal or change the rules. Over the last decade, we've seen which path they often choose. Gerrymanders, voter purges, attacks on independent courts, and attempts to criminalize protest. A broader electorate threatens that power structure. So expect the rule changing to intensify as the numbers move. That's why this is not just a poll story. It's a democracy story. We also have to be honest. Coalitions are fragile. Democrats lead when the tent is big. Labor and small business owners, seniors who want Social Security defended, college students who don't want their books banned, suburban parents who want normal school boards, veterans who want competence and alliances, not chaos. If any piece of that coalition checks out, the tide slows. If it leans in, +7 starts to look like real-world seats, not just a pretty chart on TV. So where does this go? If this holds into 2026, Democrats +7, then history says Republicans don't gain House seats. Not because of wishful thinking, but because the math of modern elections hasn't produced that outcome. If this holds into 2026, Democrats +7.
If this 7-point lead holds in the next year and it averages out next year in 2026, Democrats +7, there is no historical precedent for Republicans actually gaining House seats. The Democrats gain in every year. That looks like what Gallup shows right now.
Yeah, again, and this number right here for Democrats may be one of the better numbers they've seen in some time.
You got it exactly right.
Here's the through line one last time. Legitimacy beats intimidation when participation is high. A movement that depends on suppressing votes and drowning out reality loses altitude when more Americans simply identify with the other side. And right now, more Americans say they're Democrats than at any point in the last few cycles at this stage. That's not destiny. It's an opening. It's a signal that voters are tired of the noise and want normalcy, competence, and the rule of law. Keep the institutions independent. Keep the courts fair. Keep the press free. And keep the coalition broad enough to win on ideas, not just anger. Because if there's one lesson from the last decade, it's this. When the country gets a clear choice between democracy that works and chaos that burns, it still knows how to choose.